Welcome in to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. A podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. Hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and those who cover the NBA on a daily basis. It's time to flock up. The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. Eichenhofer and Gus Kattengell with you again as we continue now day 4 of our player profiles. And it was funny. We started out CJ's podcast by saying, do you have a nickname for CJ McCollum? I don't really know if there's many more nicknames that are so appropriate than not on Herb. He has his own shirt. He has his own logo design. It's incredible. He wants none of that, by the way. But it is incredible when you think of Herb Jones, today's player profile, and Erin Summers is going to sit with us and go over his season. Man, when you think of Herb Jones this season, overall, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it was such a great progression. I mean, he was maybe the most improved player on the team. I put up a poll on X earlier this week, and that seemed to be the resounding answer from a lot of fans that said, you know, that Herb was the most improved player. People were just impressed by the jump that he made, especially with his three-point shooting. We already knew that he was a great defensive player, but for him to be able to add that to his game where he shot over 40% was such a pleasant surprise after he'd been kind of hovering around 34% and, you know, a little bit below average percentage from three-point range. So just the progress that he made, and it's exciting to think about, you know, the fact that he still has more room to grow. By the way, too, when you were talking about the nicknames, it reminded me, I feel like one of the nicknames he was given as a rookie was Straight Jacket, and I feel like that one's kind of fallen by the wayside, even though I really like that nickname, but I feel like not on Herb has just overtaken everything at this point.
No doubt. Well, we can try to bring that up for next season. I'm sure it'll be a fun logo design when it comes to that here as well. All right, let's have Erin Summers come in, Pelicans team reporter and silent reporter on the radio broadcast, to break down Herb Jones, the season that was. All right, time to welcome in Miss Erin Summers, Saints and Pelicans team reporter, and, of course, part of the broadcast right there in that baseline. I need to know the most important thing out of the entire season. Have you ever wanted to throw a heating pad or towel at an official? That's what I need to know, Erin Summers.
I have not, but I have looked up over my left shoulder to the media level to see if Graf was going to be coming catapulting out of that area at any point in time. I've been able to restrain myself.
That would be more of a chair up there. But yes, that's a good candidate for somebody that would throw something onto the court. Eichenhofer, have you ever, Jim Eichenhofer, Pelicans.com, of course, have you ever wanted to just toss something in it? Now, that's a heck of a toss now from where you're sitting.
Yeah, I'd have to have like a Major League Baseball pitcher's arm to be able to make it to the court. Now, you ask, have I ever wanted to? I've wanted to do a lot of things, Gus. I just haven't actually followed through on, say, throwing a heat pack on the court while the game is going on. That was the part that was even crazy about what we saw Monday night. It wasn't like, you know, we've seen Steph Curry throw a mouthpiece, but there was a foul called on him and the game stopped and there, you know, people are walking back on the court and the ball was actually in play when this happened. So that kind of blew my mind. So yeah, I've thought about a lot of things, but I don't think I would actually follow through on 99.9% of those thoughts that cross my mind.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, look, I know it's been a couple of days, but Game 3 is tomorrow on Friday. And what's nuts is obviously the league's had time to look at it, and it was a huge topic of conversation on Tuesday. And look, I'm a little league coach. I mean, you don't throw anything onto a field, much less a court, much less an official. I mean, that's just crazy to me. Now, I understand it wasn't seen, but the amount of people, I guess, that was surprising Monday night, Draymond Green, one of them, didn't think it was a suspensible act or whatever it is. It's shocking. Which was funny because he said he doesn't think, he says something like, he's surprised how many people want to call for suspensions. Now, he said that could have been a dangerous thing, but it shouldn't be a suspension. No, by the very fact that it is a dangerous thing, it should be a suspension.
Just because it didn't happen to hit anybody. But fans get thrown out of games. If they throw stuff on the court, immediately they're gone.
Yeah.
So,
like I said, you get a technical foul or ejected if you cuss to an official. or look at something. And earlier in that series, not Jamal Murray, Anthony Edwards got a T for looking the wrong. We've seen here with the Pelicans, players, Herb Jones, I think we're going to talk about today, has got a technical for looking at a player the wrong way without saying a word. I mean, it's just crazy to me that you would throw something to an official, but I guess it just kind of goes to what that series is. Have you been surprised by what Minnesota was able to do, Erin?
It's been incredible. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago, like what surprised us the most in the first round of the playoffs, and it was the physicality, the defense, just how intense that the Timberwolves have been playing. I didn't realize they were that good at just smothering people and limiting everything that they could do.
Yeah, I mean, they were number one in defense, and it's unbelievable the level that they've taken it to be able to hold the Nuggets in Game 2 to 35 points in the first half was unbelievable. And then at the end of the game, they had 80, which was, to me, is even more impressive that you were able to do it, not just
so it happens to other people.
Yeah.
That's the key.
You know, it's funny, Gus, you mentioned the part about Draymond, which I didn't realize his comments afterwards, but it's funny because I said right after Game 2 that the Nuggets somehow have been watching a lot of Draymond game tape because not only were they able to not get a technical foul for throwing a heat pack on the court, but Michael Malone was screaming at an official in the middle of the court, right in his face, and there was no technical for that. So somehow, is there a Draymond Green instructional school that we can enroll in to figure out the level that you can go to still not get a technical foul and not get an ejection? Because I feel like that would be worth whatever the fee is to get into that school.
Well, I tell you, I think Erin would agree. One of the first students to that school will be the player profile we're going to profile today, and that's Herb Jones, because I would say at times this year has been baffling how quickly he was able to 14 seconds, I think, right? Within the last 2 weeks, it was one of the games with the Lakers. He picked up a personal foul in 14 seconds.
Two, and then he had 4 in the freaking third quarter alone.
Yeah. So can we enroll him into that class? Look, we're going to preview him. Obviously, we talk about defense. We've seen what the T-Wolves and Ant and Conley and all of them been able to do. And I think of defense, and when I think of the Pelicans, I think of Herb Jones. I mean, Zion Williamson said that. I want to get to him in a quick second. Erin, we've been asking everybody that's joined us, though, off the bat, just your overall overview of what this past season was for the Pelicans.
I think that it would be obvious enough to say that they didn't reach expectations, because the expectations that the team themselves set were going to be 6th seed or higher in the Western Conference standings at the end of the season. They did not want to deal with the play-in mess this year. Unfortunately, not how things happened, but I think there are a lot of other bright spots that you can look at, and that starts with Zion Williamson being able to play 70-plus games this season, his availability. Things like Herb Jones developing his offense even more, becoming a two-way force. Trey Murphy, even though he had to sit for so long, seemed like he was really growing into himself towards the end of the season. So there are things that were good. Unfortunately, there were just a couple injuries that happened at a really bad time when a Western Conference that is so competitive, everybody needed wins, and they were competing at such a high level. You had the Clippers that were just dominating, and then they fell off a cliff. But that hurt us, because during that stretch when they were playing really well, Brandon Ingram was out. So little things like that, I mean, you can't control. I think overall, though, you got to the playoffs again. That in itself is a success, and hopefully we can build off of it.
As far as Herb goes, you know, we're going to get into, I'm sure, some specifics about his shooting and his defense and all of the things that he brought to the table in his third season. But one of the things I wanted to start with you, Erin, specifically is kind of talking about some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that you get to see and just the experience that you have of being there for practice every day and sitting in the vantage point that you have for the home games. What are some of your takeaways maybe on just the way that Herb interacts with teammates? Like, it seems like he's very guarded sometimes with the media, but what's it like? It seems like it's obvious that he's very beloved among the guys, but and Trey Murphy and him seem to be extremely tight, like the best of friends. But what's it like, just the way that he kind of the teammates, what their perspective of him is and how they interact with him?
I think I've mentioned this on occasion. He is my favorite person to watch on the bench, because he is always up. He is always clapping. He's always encouraging. his teammates. You can tell how much he loves good basketball, and he's cheering for the success of everybody next to him on the bench, everybody on the floor. I mean, he gets so excited for everybody. And I think that is such just, a component to him that isn't highlighted enough, because he is quiet. Because he doesn't beat his own chest. He doesn't go out there and talk about how good he is defensively, how much his offensive has improved. And he really doesn't go out there and say, well, I'm a great teammate, because he is quiet. So it's not as vocal as maybe Jose Alvarado, who's literally running up and down the baseline, and jumping up and down, and you notice him more. But I think he's got to be one of the best teammates for sure. And he's the hardest worker, I would have to say. There are so many occasions this year when I heard that he was going to the SKC before they even talked about it, before they actually held some shoot-arounds there. He was going to the SKC the night before games, asking if he could, get the court reserved for a couple hours so he could go shoot there and be more comfortable in the arena. Like, what a concept. And then at the end of the season, he started bringing Trey with him, to your point about how close they are. And then the team started doing their shoot-arounds there. So I think that him establishing those types of,
leadership.
Yeah. Just things that he sets out and does something, and other people see, oh, well, it's working for him. He's spending hours in the gym with Fred Vinson. He knows what he's doing. His work ethic, his character, just how good of a teammate he is, cannot be highlighted enough.
Along the lines of the teammate, to your point that you were just saying too as well, I go back to October in training camp, and I remember that first month too, right afterwards when the season started, Willie Green saying that I kind of took me to surprise. We said they told him and asked him to be more vocal and to be a leader. And then during the season, I think one of the best statements he said during the year was, yeah, sometimes I get vocal because I need to get other people to. You remember that during the season? So it's interesting to see him grow in that area. And I know during the podcast, Jim, we'll get into specifically, we talked about how he's improved in his offense, or he's improved on his defense. And there's no way he'd be a second-round pick if he could shoot the three like he did this year. But I think that's the thing that I think of this year was at the very beginning of the season, Willie Green said, we made him a captain. We want him to be a captain. We want him to be a leader. And you wouldn't think that of all of the personalities, but that's because we don't get to see him as much as you get to see him on the bench and we don't. But so I was surprised I didn't see that.
He leads by example for sure. And then he encourages everybody else. And so I think that Coach Green saw how good he is, obviously, defensively, and he loves that, wants other people to kind of figure that side of the ball out as well. And so he was asking Herb to be more vocal, to talk to guys, to tell people what to do or where to be, because he sees the game so well. All of those things combined, and the fact that he already signed his contract last year, before we see this offensive elevation in his game, before he probably could make a lot more money, and he's happy and content. I mean, that is the epitome of a foundational piece for your program.
For sure. Because
he puts in the work. You don't ever have a problem with him off the court. You never have attitude issues. You don't have to worry about him showing up every day, ready to go. He's done his homework, and people love being around him. So,
yeah, he's extremely low maintenance as a person, as a player. From what you saw, I mean, how do his teammates react when he is more demonstrative? He is more expressive. I know you mentioned how quiet he is and how he doesn't really like drawing attention to himself at all, and he doesn't like necessarily the not on Herb shirts because it's just too much, as he said. But I mean, how did you see the other guys on the team react when Herb was like slightly more, kind of maybe pumping his fist or after he made a good play?
Oh my gosh, they love it.
Yeah.
I mean, they love seeing the stuff that he does defensively, because as many of them have said, you just don't see that every day. You know, him running halfway across the court and blocking a Paul George 3, it doesn't happen. And so they get excited for that type of athleticism, that anticipation for him knowing, being where he's supposed to be. But then when Herb gets excited about it, I think it just kicks things up another level. And the smiles and the high fives and people running out there to dap him up. And I think that they want him to lean into it a little more. Like, what you're doing is not normal. And it's okay to be proud of that and to lean into it a little bit. And maybe in what we were talking about earlier, if you carry yourself a little bit differently, you're not going to get some of the calls that you have been getting.
Yeah.
You know, Draymond clearly asserts himself, tells you how he feels about stuff, and doesn't seem to get a lot of the calls that he should. Not saying that we want Herb to become anything like Draymond, because we do not. But, and you did see him start to gain some confidence in that regard. You're talking to some of the refs, telling the refs how he felt sometimes about some of the calls, or how it wasn't being called both ways. And I think that that's okay for him to do. I think, especially, we feel like he's earned that with his play, but hopefully the league will see it too.
You talked about leading by example. I mean, per Zion, he was one of the guys, if not probably the foundational piece of getting that light to switch for him.
Defensively,
to switch defensively. It's like, man, I can't watch what he does, and I'm not doing my part. So I think that's a huge thing when you think about it. If you can get a guy of that caliber and magnitude to unlock another part of his game, and you saw how big that was down the stretch for the Pels, that's a good thing. Then that player also sees his work ethic. Look at what he's doing. He's in the gym. He's spending, look at Zion from March till April.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw a transformation physically, mentally, defensively. So, man, I don't know. Are we giving awards for MVP on the year? But that's got to be a candidate based off of coach says go be a captain, go be a leader. You see him improve offensively. He helps somebody or players on his team get better. I mean, that's a pretty valuable player, which is why you just said he's a foundational piece.
I would say he's had an effect on everybody on the team in one way or another. Zion is very vocal about how he feels about Herb and how Herb has affected him. You can see the smile that Zion just lights up anytime he gets to talk about Herb. And I think that kind of appreciation for somebody in the game that was a second round pick, that didn't come in as highly touted as Zion did, and for him to kind of humbly be like, man, I need to learn some things from this guy is huge. It says a lot about Zion and his maturation this season as well. That is something that, the statistics, you can't look at a box score and see the impact that Herb has had in that regard. But I think it's probably the biggest area that he's affected this team this year.
When Herb came in as a second-round pick, Gus mentioned how if he was this kind of shooter when he came out of Alabama, there's no way he would have been available at number 35. But, I mean, from what you've seen, how do you go from being a guy who was considered a non-shooter coming out of college to he almost did 50-40-90 this year, which if you think about it, on the guys on this team, if you said before the season who's going to be 50-40-90, people would have said CJ or Trey probably. I mean, those guys, Trey did it in college a couple times. But, I mean, how does a guy go from where he was after college to being almost one of the historic seasons in NBA history? He really only missed it he shot 86.7% from the free throw line, which is still amazing. But that was the only category that kept him from being 50-40-90.
Yeah, I mean, at Alabama, he only shot 34 total threes. Or had 34 total threes.
That's crazy.
Total. Yeah. In 4 years. Yeah. And this year, he had over 100 and shot a higher percent, 41.8%. So he had career highs in shooting percentage, 3-point percentage, points per game, assists per game, free throw shooting. He already defends at an all defensive elite level. But I think that it is just the work that he does put in, how much he cares about the game and how much he understands he needed to add that. He talked about how he felt disrespected in his first couple seasons here because people weren't guarding him.
Yeah.
And he took that personally. Go ahead and drop the meme there. But he said that he wanted to go in and do everything that he possibly could to work on what he felt was a weakness, and he didn't feel like he should be treated that way. So people now go out and guard him, and I know people were upset he wasn't hitting as many threes towards the end of the season, but he was getting different attention as the season went on than he had earlier.
Speaking of taking things personally, as we record this, I'm not sure yet what the timing is of going to be of the all defensive teams of when the NBA is going to announce.
You're already
those.
getting mad and getting ready for it?
No, I was going to say. I was actually going to direct this in another way of saying, if he's not first team all defense, what is the reaction going to be from other Pelicans players?
I've thought about this a lot. What is Herb Jones' ceiling? How much better can he get? And if he felt disrespected from outside, people not guarding him, and we've seen the drastic improvement there, if he doesn't make all defensive first team or one of the teams, how is he going to approach the offseason this year, and what is he going to look like next year? I mean, I don't know how much better you can get defensively, but he's not going to stop.
Right.
And his teammates are probably going to, maybe send CJ up to the league office and say, Mr. President, have like a protest at the front door. I don't know. I mean, they are probably going to light things on fire because of how loudly they've been in his favor.
Just don't throw any heat packs.
No heat packs. I was going to say, part of me hopes he doesn't get it. That way he can get angrier and do that, embrace the anger. But to your point, let's do that. Like, let's say he sits down and goes, what do I have to do? I'm trying to think of what. He blocks those shots. He blocks those threes. The only thing I can think of, Erin, is what we started out kind of a little bit in just a conversation of trying to guard without maybe the hand checking and getting the foul trouble and maybe of that nature. Maybe that's that next game. Now, is that the officiating giving him that? Mm-hmm. Is it working on your feet a little bit better? Or, and I'm just thinking of, the Nuggets had like 2 shots in a row, and then Conley stole the ball, threw it to Anthony Edwards, and it felt like the Nuggets couldn't get past the 3-point arc. Is it defending on the arc, on the 3-point shot, and maybe getting more steals this year? I'm trying to think of how you can improve from that aspect.
Right. He was third in the NBA in contested 3-point shots per game. Third.
Of all the NBA?
All the NBA.
Okay.
He was one of 7 players to average 1.4 steals and almost a block a game. 13th in steals per game. He was 15th in charges drawn, so maybe you can bump that up a little bit. He allows 0.73 points per possession, which was good for 11th. So we're talking he is top 15 in every possible defensive category. So, yeah, I guess you could get to first, but it's pretty dang good in his 3rd season in the NBA, and then you add in what he was able to do offensively, as I mentioned, career highs across the board. And it's not just his ability to shoot from outside. He got better at putting the ball on the ground, like the floor, and driving to the basket, his little Euro step that he loves to do. But what I think is really key about his game is how good he is in transition. Because when he does steal the ball, when he does have a deflection, he goes.
He dunks. Yes, he
goes.
Yes,
so,
he does.
Sure, there's areas of his game that he can tweak, but yeah, statistically, I don't know.
I'd be curious to know, and I would say we weren't going here, so I don't have any info, anything to answer, but it would be fun maybe one day for us three to kind of look at this too. Maybe look at the top 5, or who are the guys, even last year or this year, that are all first team, whatever, and the players around them. I wonder if that has something to do with it, because obviously if Zion plays the way that he plays defensively. BI's played the best this year defensively. Say CJ plays a little bit better, or you have that rim protector. Like, I wonder, the guys that are top 5, all defense, do they have a surrounding cast around them that also plays some defense that kind of help them out? Because, again, when I think of defense, I think of him with the Pelicans. Like Zion improved, BI had his best year. But let's be honest, like, on this team, he's by far the best defensive player. So he's being asked to guard the best player. Maybe doesn't have the help on the perimeter. So that's why I'm just curious, when I think of the top other players, do they have rim protectors? Do they have guys that get steals as well,
Well, a lot of players on our team have said they feel more confident defensively because they know if they make a mistake, Herb's there.
You have him, right.
And he'll clean everything up for you, it is nice to have a security blanket like that, but Poor Herb, man. Everything falls on his shoulders.
In terms of like, he's almost like a football analogy, which you're aware of. He's almost the pass rusher, right? He's almost Cam Jordan. He's a Mario Davis. Go get the ball and do all that. And he's also Tyrann Mathieu. He's also the safety that makes play. And Lattimore that has to cover the best receiver, if that makes any sense. You know?
Yeah, I think what happens a lot of times with the all-defense teams that we've seen in past years is sometimes the best defenses will get 2 or 3 guys listed. So like Boston, I think, had 2 guys last year. So I think to your point, that's very valid that a lot of times your individual recognition is based a lot on how the team does defensively overall. New Orleans has been 6th in defensive ranking the last 2 seasons in a row. So you would think that would definitely help him. But I mean, I think if you get into the top 2 or 3 of defense, it's almost like automatic that you're going to get at least one guy in either the first team or the second team.
I don't think it's so much defense. I mean, yes, that's part of it, but Boston was also one of the best team in the league last year. Mm-hmm. So it's just overall team recognition, how much you're on a national stage, how much people see you. And last year, understandably so, the Pelicans weren't on as many national broadcasts because they had tried to do it so many times in the past years and everybody was hurt. And maybe next year, now that Zion played it as much as he did, the Pelicans will get a little bit more love on a national stage and people can see Herb and how great he is.
That's a great point. I literally can hear the TNT crew, the talk shows in the morning nationally on Tuesday say, wow, Anthony Edwards is this good. I'm like, no, they've been that good all season long. I mean, like, people are surprised OKC won the West. I'm like, no, you just haven't been watching them because, to your point, most of the other, we've had the Lakers 600 times on it. By the way, Jim, how's that coaching search going? I know you're very, very interested in that.
I don't have a lot of information about the coaching search, but the one thing I do know is that whoever gets hired will be scapegoated eventually. Whether it's after one season or 2, he will be blamed for whatever happens.
Already.
I know.
Who wants to step up to get fired?
Right.
Like, who wants that?
That's part of the problem, yeah. Exactly.
I don't know, but we have to talk Lakers. That's what it is. I get the email on my ESPN affiliate. I have to do that, but also actually because the Pels own some draft picks, so we have to pay attention to them as well. But
either way, whatever happens, Herb Jones will be a problem for that coach.
I love that. That's good. But
Perfect.
Thank you for your insight on that. Erin Summers, give her a follow over on X. Erin E. Summers, thank you for your time.
Definitely.
As always, we thank Erin for her time. Jim, the last handful of stats she gave there was incredible when it comes to his defense. Top 15 in all those different categories. Again, part of me hopes he doesn't get all defensive player first team, because then he'll get angry and he'll come in and do that. But it is true. I asked it to both of y'all, but he can get better. There's so much different aspects to it that he can improve on. And he's probably shooting down the street right now from where we are.
He probably is. I mean, he probably has a fishing pole nearby, though. When he finally takes a break, he'll be heading to a fishing hole. But you're right. I mean, part of why I'm so optimistic and enthusiastic about how much more he can get better as an offensive player is all the stuff that he's shown already. Not only has he improved as a three-point shooter, but I think his finishing around the basket continues to get better and better. Erin referenced his fast break effectiveness, about how he loves to get out and run, and he can, dunk the ball as you always prefer, Gus. And
I would love that.
I just feel like you should never doubt his ability to add different things to his game. Maybe we'll see more of like a mid-range game. Maybe we'll see more pull-up threes. That was one thing that, we talked a little bit about during the season, that most of his threes were catch and shoot, but he did start to take a couple off the dribble. So maybe we'll see more of that. I just feel like he's so capable with his work ethic and how smart he is as a basketball player, of taking the next few months of the summer and saying, I'm going to focus on this one thing and just repeatedly hone in on it, and then come back in training camp, and all of a sudden we see a new part of Herb's game that we hadn't seen before.
I have an entire list of things that I would like to see right here, and that being, of course, everybody be more aggressive and just drive to the because he is one of the quicker Pelicans players. I would love to see him, and you see him be able to go coast to coast sometimes and dunk and do those things. I think with teams, what we saw, especially towards the end of the season and in the playoffs, they were guarding the Pelicans 3-point line. And I think the best way to keep them from doing that is when they come out to grab you, get right by them, drive to the rim, dish, Z will be there, or if not, dunk the ball. I think that'll be something fans would love to see. Enough of the layups already. It's just, but I think he is a player. Trey Murphy's another one, and we're going to get to him in another player profile. That is the easiest thing I can think that he can add to his game, because people are going to run out to him to do the three. Erin just mentioned teams defended Herb Jones differently towards the end of the year when they realized he was making those corner threes. So the threes went down because he was actually getting defended from shooting that. So I think if those two players in particular can drive to the basket, that's been, really cool. And the thing that's crazy for me, because on Pell's Twitter, everyone's a general manager. And per Pell's general managers, all and around the fan base, which, by the way, I'm not making fun of you. I love that. An involved fan base that thinks they can be a GM or a head coach means you're an involved fan base. So I will take that any day. But what's incredible to me is Trey, who we'll talk about next week. But Herb Jones, a second-round pick, is frequently talked about not only an untouchable, but a foundational piece moving forward in the franchise. And when you think of how far that has come, Jim, a new contract, and now collectively, when you think New Orleans Pelicans, that is a piece moving forward. Like, I would love to know if our organization thinks we're a foundational piece. Like, we cannot move on without Jim Eichenhofer and Gus Kattengell. But just when you think about that, there's only 5 players, that start. And for pretty much everyone to feel, hey, if we're going to win, he has to be a foundational piece. It's really incredible when you think about going from a second-round pick to a captain this year to after this year, people going, oh, no, moving forward, we can get rid of Pierre, get rid of everybody. You cannot get rid of Herb Jones. Like, that's incredible to me.
Right. Yeah, no, my thought is when you brought up Herb and Trey, as far as future pieces of the team and foundations of it, to me, a lot of this goes back to, I remember in 2019 when David Griffin came in, he talked about how we're going to focus on some of the intangibles that players have, whether it's work ethic or maturity. And those two guys are really good examples of that. They really made a good decision on those draft picks as far as the makeup of those guys. It's hard to measure some of that stuff. There's not really at the NFL Combine, they have a 40 where they measure how fast a guy is. It's hard to come up with a concrete way of saying, like, how mature is this guy or how smart is this guy. But I feel like in those two cases in particular, and as well as with some of the other players that have been drafted in recent years, the fact that they focused a lot on that has really paid dividends. And that's a big reason why those two guys, like you said, are just pieces of the team, not only short term but long term, guys that you picture that can be here for a long time because they approach things the right way, and because of that, we're seeing the improvement from year to year from them.
And let's not get this mistaken. Jim Eichenhofer is a foundational piece of your New Orleans Pelicans. You can give him a follow over on X, Jim_Eichenhofer, NewOrleansPelicans.com. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Gus. They can't get rid of me. I've been here for 19 years. If they haven't been able to get rid of me yet, then I don't see it happening.
I don't even know you're still around. It's one or the other, like Office Space. Yeah, exactly.
More likely,
Jim's still here, huh? Wow, we didn't know that. Where's his office? It's the best way to go about it.
Profile.
That's the best way to go about it.
You can't get in trouble if they don't know you're there.
All right, Jonas Valanciunas still to come, and of course, a handful of players in our player profiles. Thanks for tuning us in on the New Orleans Pelicans podcast.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans podcast. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, the iHeartRadio app, or where you get your podcasts. And be sure to give Jim and Gus a follow on X at Jim_Eichenhofer and GCat_17. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Pelicans podcast.